easier for everything. And Sarah, good morning.
Good morning.
Good to see you again.
Good to see you.
Well, it's good to have my regular tracker here, and delighted to be with you today. We're heading back to DC. I got a 11:45 loading time, so we'll. That's sometimes how it feels. You'll load on, you know. Find how small of a seat that you can get into.
Is that what you do? You find regular?
Oh yeah.
How you do?
Most members all fly.
That's what.
Coach.
Yeah.
Occasionally we get an upgrade, and it's very, very seldom. It have to be a Sunday flight or something. Get an upgrade because it's nobody on the plane to speak of. But that flight to DC is heavily traveled, and a lot of people have platinum, diamond ratings, so they get the upgrades. But as long as we good morning, as long as we land and walk away every time, it's a good flight. So.
I'll second that.
Yeah. Well, thanks for joining us this morning. We continue to do these town hall meetings and appreciate the opportunity to stand and report what's going on in Washington, as well as hear questions and comments that you have. It gives us the opportunity to hear perspectives that come from all sorts of sides of the issue, whether it's in a town hall or did 2 teletown halls last week. Some of you may in fact been on one of those. And then the cards and letters and emails that come in, and of course then the opportunity to be out in the district and stop at places of work, manufacturing sites, schools, all of the above, and get a perspective of what the district's looking at. Still think the most recent talk continues to be on the positive impact of the Tax Cut Jobs Act bill. It's exciting to see something that was purported to work because of past job bills and tax cut bills. It's working again. Work with John F. Kennedy, work with Reagan, work with Clinton, work with to some degree Bush, and it's working again now. The concern is that we just don't simply spend it all. As we see the revenue grow once the tax cut begins to take effect, not just in the withholding in your individual pay stub, but when it actually goes in effect after April 15th, that's the last time you file your taxes under the old tax law, and the new tax law begins. We've seen significant response from the business community, both corporations and small businesses. Over 400 businesses now across the United States have reported that they're giving pay raises, bonuses, enhancements of benefits, expansions of facilities. We've seen companies like Apple bring dollars back from overseas with a one-time penalty that they'll receive, a lesser penalty they had before. All of that speaks to the good. FCA, Chrysler, is starting up a plant here in Michigan, Warren, to build the heavy Ram truck. That was in Mexico, 2,500 new jobs brought back to Michigan because of the tax cuts bill. Rate reductions have been requested from the Public Service Commission by DTE and Consumers Energy, amounting to a combined almost $400 million of rate reductions. That'll be nice on your energy bill to see that impact. And then that's taking place with energy utilities all across the United States. So a lot of good things happening as a result of that, and we look forward to seeing more as it comes in. Most recent issue relative to concerns in the United States is the resulted from the shootings in Florida that took place at the school. Sad situation, and the more we find out about it, the more frustrating we feel about the fact that this could have been stopped. If local and federal law enforcement entities, school personnel themselves had carried out a response to what they knew. Just this morning, we hear more reports about the fact that this guy could have been pulled and involuntarily committed to mental health care, which would have made it impossible for him to get those weapons or to be in a place to use those. That was missed. While there are a lot of things that we can look at, and again, my perspective is that local school districts should be making the decisions for the best interests of their kids and using what's necessary to make those decisions, to make those upgrades, those improvements to the school, the ability to get in and out of the school, what they need as far as personnel in the school. They ought to make those decisions. Because frankly, no school is exactly alike. And in Onstead schools, my school district, the school boards, the parents, the faculty know better about what actually is happening in the school district than anyone outside, or certainly in Washington, D.C. So what we've done so far, last week we passed legislation that I think goes a long way to assist local districts, law enforcement agencies, and students to get a handle on this issue. We passed a bill that gives grant funding to enhance the training for students, for law enforcement officials, for teachers, for administrators, on what to recognize and how to recognize something that is going on in a community's life or a student's life, like Nick Cruz, and then what to do to handle it. There's also grant funding that will allow the development of a red flag opportunity to make quick response, see something, say something, call a key number which will get to the right authorities in the district and put on notice that this is happening and something needs to be done. And then further, the ability to use some of these resources to harden your schools, to decide if you need some security inside the building and what that security is going to look like. It makes all good sense to, again, give that opportunity. Beyond that, back in December, the House passed a NICS fix bill, as it was called, instant background check fix, to fill some of the holes that are there in reporting and requirements to make that report. Sadly, that still sits in the Senate. Both of these bills that I'm talking about were undertaken before and introduced before this most recent shooting took place. The NICS fix bill was introduced before the shooting in Sutherland Springs at the Baptist Church there, with 26 lives taken. We are hopeful that the Senate will use the legislation that we've sent to them and at least pass that. If they want to discuss further issues, fine, but at least pass these bills to get a start on handling the situations that we have. We have a Constitution, we have a Second Amendment, we have a First Amendment. All 10 amendments are our Bill of Rights. We have to contend with those, but in the meantime we can do things that I think will help in that issue. So those are some of the most pertinent, up-to-date. We could talk about a bunch of other things, but I know we have questions. Wayne, thank you for being the moderator here today, and Wayne's going to read the name and then just give the basic content of the question, subject of the question, and then if you would like to state the question yourself, if that's your question, we'll let you do that, and if you don't want to, then Wayne can read it.
Okay, first question. My name is Wayne Blank. I'm a trustee from Monroe Township and very busy in community activities. So just to give you a little background of what I do. First question is from Joe Gettner. Joe, would you like to state your own question? You want me to read it?
Well, I'm just curious. All these tax cuts and everything is really great, but if the Russians are influencing our democracy, it's not going to mean much. So I'd like you to get your situation on Trump with his regards to Russia and the Mueller situation with regards to Trump.
Well, President Trump has continued the Mueller investigation. He hasn't asked for it to end. He's expressed some concerns about it.
What if he does?
Well, I think that's his opportunity. He is the Justice Department, the FBI. This investigation is under the Justice Department, so he has some control over that. He also has counsel that comes from his Attorney General, who recused himself from carrying on with this. I think wrongly so, but it's what it is. And so it goes on. We all know that Russia has attempted to meddle, will continue to attempt to meddle. They attempt to meddle all over the world. We know that. And President Obama knew it, did nothing about it. So something has to be done on it. And thus far we know that there was no impact on the outcome of the elections as a result of Russia. So beyond that, we're going to keep looking into it. That's why the investigation's been done. That's why the Intelligence Committee looked at it. In the House, ultimately concluded after many, many testimonies were taken that their information is enough and complete and has ended it. Mueller's investigation continues on.
What about Trump's response or lack of response to Russia and everything that they're...
Well, I think Trump put some sanctions on just last week, some very significant sanctions on Russia.
He hasn't come out and said it to the public.
Oh, he did. That doesn't mean that the media reports it. In fact, you get all the negatives on Trump from the media, not the other way around. But no, sanctions, significant sanctions, I think 16 different sanctions, including on some individual Russians, were undertaken again and enhanced last week. That's the rest of the story. Next question.
Okay, just a second, ma'am. Ma'am, just a second.
I just
Joe?
want to clarify something he said, that's all.
We're going to go through the questions first. If you have a question, write it out and he'll deal with it.
Not, you don't want to clarify that you said he has an opportunity?
Do you want to go ahead with your second question, Joe?
No, that was all.
That was all.
wrapped
Okay,
into
that
one.
was all, okay. Okay, Jerry Heck. Jerry, do you want to introduce your question and want me to read it?
No, I can, I guess I've kind of kept up through different sources on status of the Farm Bill, which is important to farmers, and I don't know if you've got any further insight in what we do on when it might make it to the floor of the House for a vote.
We're thinking relatively soon. Checked with Representative Mike Conway from Texas, who's the chair, last week, and he feels very good that it's coming within the next 3-4 weeks for a vote. The only challenge they have right now is the level of SNAP funding,
Yeah.
not the fact that SNAP will still be included in the Farm Bill. The intentions are to keep it there, but just some issues. Other than that, it seems like most of the issues are cared for. I mean, there'll be an amendment on sugar and those type of things, but the committee intends to have it out within the next 3-4 weeks.
Okay, good.
And it'll be based heavily on the last 2 farm bills. It's been building, trying to play off the fact of farmers take responsibility, but then giving opportunity for protections with crop insurance and things like that. So.
Next question, Claire Renwick. Would you like to ask your own question?
I actually had 3 of them there or something.
I
I don't know
know.
if you're kind of putting them in groups or whatever, but I'll just start with one. I know you do a lot of town halls. I've been to some, but have stopped going to ones that are so far away, just based on my schedule. And I know with your tax cuts and jobs that that's a big interest of yours and you promote it, but I guess my question is, when are you gonna have a town hall that workers can come to? I'm sure you don't expect people to take off of work to come to a town hall, and I haven't seen anything. I've seen engagements that you've had, but as far as a town hall, I haven't seen anything after 5 o'clock or on a Saturday morning.
He's done 10 out of the last 93 on a time where workers could come. That's what the record is.
What is it?
He's done 10 out of his last 94 now with today.
Let's go on with answering her question, and it sure doesn't stop you from getting here. 4 out of the last 5.
Fred, that's so irrelevant. It's amazing to me that you keep bringing it up. It's
4 out of the
so
last
irrelevant.
5, you're able to get it. So
That's
if
right.
you're here to
But you know what? My situation is
pick up the town meetings, that's the way it goes.
Hey, if you're addressing me,
So bottom line is, I'm not addressing you,
Yes,
I'm
you
addressing
did.
her.
No, you addressed me, sir.
Now, on the issue,
I waived my
Sir?
time too.
on the issue, no, there's no waiving of time.
Okay.
Come on.
But
Bottom line is, your former member of Congress, how many town halls did he do?
I'm not asking.
No,
He
I'm
was.
bringing in the point. We do town halls more than normal
I know you
of
do.
the members of
I know.
Congress.
And I
We do
applaud
it
you.
relative to our time schedule. I'm doing it before I get on a plane and fly to Washington.
Right,
I'd love to do it tonight, but I'll be in Washington.
well, that's, yeah,
Yeah, we have done it on Saturday, probably percentage-wise as much as the other days of the week. But we'll do it with our schedule. We do town halls in manufacturing facilities with employees
yes.
on a regular basis.
Yeah, yeah.
Those are people that are working and are given a voluntary opportunity during a break time to meet and hear from their legislator.
But of all your constituents, what percentage
but
of
we
the
also-
working people work in those?
Yeah, but we also do tele-town halls at night when the working people are home.
Yeah,
And we have 3,000 people on at any given time during those town halls. So what I'm trying to say to you is, out of 535 members of Congress, House and Senate, I'm ranked number 10 for the number of live town halls that I do. And I ask you, before redistricting took place, and I was given the privilege to represent Monroe County along with the other 6 counties that I have, the former representative did how many town halls?
and I don't mean
I
to
rest
be
my case.
disrespectful.
I rest my
I
case.
think I'm talking about quality and not quantity.
Well,
As far as having
I-
the young.
I feel it's
Don't we want
quality.
our young people to get more
Oh,
involved?
absolutely.
So.
But you know
have a bunch
something?
of seniors sitting here, me included.
Well, me included,
Yeah, you included.
me included.
But
And
anyway, I would really like
we go
to see this.
where younger people are.
Yeah.
Trust me on that. We do
I read
plenty.
the paper, I know where you are.
We do plenty. This is additional that we do. And I do this, and I get grief from a lot of people that show up and travel to give me grief for doing it this way. We still do it. It'd be easier at times if I just did my teletown halls, and I just did my manufacturing site visits and town halls there, and we just went to the schools and talked to the students, and went to the ag community in the Farm Bureau meetings. If we just did that, I wouldn't get some of the grief that I get here, but this is part of my responsibility
Right.
to be everywhere.
Yeah.
And so, while some people will take an offense at it, I'm sorry about that. I don't mean to be offensive on it. I mean to do the best job I can representing the 7 counties in my district and getting across a district that takes from Erie Township on the way up to Sunfield, almost 5 hours to drive, and making sure I'm everywhere, including teletown halls, 2 done last week, after hours,
By invitation,
robocall that goes out to everybody.
by invitation, yeah.
That's the only way we can do it. We go directly to the phone lines. They can choose to stay on or get off. So we'll keep doing that. What are the other 2 questions she had?
The other
What's she
one was
do?
your opinion on the Students' March for Our Lives.
Just
Our
the
Life-
movement
Our
and then
Lives
march,
movement.
yeah,
This is First Amendment
yeah.
opportunities. And if the school districts deal with their students the way they choose to deal with them, that's their choice.
Yeah, yeah, I
If the
agree.
students, I mean, that they participate in our free system of communications and First Amendment opportunities there as well.
Do you plan to participate on Saturday? That's the public.
No, I won't be there on Saturday. I'll be back here in the district doing things.
Oh, no, well, they have them in here.
Yeah, no, I've
I
got
don't mean in
plans already.
Washington.
I don't think they necessarily want me. They're gonna do their thing and we'll get the information on it. We're listening, of course.
Okay.
That's why we, in the House, have put through 2 pieces of legislation that would have impacted that shooting in a very positive way. It would have stopped it. Talk to Senator Stabenow and Senator Peters and tell them to go to Chuck Schumer and say, stop filibustering. Take these bills up. Pass them out. Send it back to the House. Go to conference committee, but let's get them done. The House has done our work. We'd like the Senate to do its work as well. 3rd question?
I want to leave time for people. I feel like
Okay.
I'm monopolizing.
Let's go on.
Okay, before I ask this 3rd question, let's keep this positive. We don't need any negative comments on some of these questions. Let's keep it positive, keep it on track here. You'll have time afterwards to voice an opinion, I'm sure. Claire Renwick.
That's me, again. What
Okay.
was that one? Real quick, what was,
Discourage bad behavior.
oh, yeah, McCabe. So with them firing McCabe 26 hours before he's met his pension hour requirement, that's one thing. But then I wanted to ask you, are you in favor of a couple of the congressmen that came forward and said they would hire McCabe just to fill in those couple days so he could get his pension? Would you support
Mark
that?
Pocan and I are good friends. I know he's one that offered it, and that's fine if he wants to do that.
Mhm.
The IG had another opinion.
Right.
The IG, who'd done all the research on McCabe and what he'd done, said bad acting took place.
Mhm. Quite a while ago.
Well, yeah, but it's found out by the IG. The IG is respected very highly, but he has no prosecutorial power. He can't fire anybody. He just gives a report. And on the basis of that report, the decision was made. McCabe, I guess, made his bed. Whether I would have fired him or not isn't the question. The president did it. I may have let it carry on out
Well,
because,
Sessions actually did it, right?
yeah, Sessions, but
Yeah.
it's the president. And it's
But they didn't even follow the procedure for his rights. I mean, people that work for the government have appeal rights and stuff like that. So, and I know you're very pro-worker, so.
well, not
that's why I
necessarily.
asked.
Does McCabe have the same rights as a normal civil service employee? They're at will. So, you know, my staff is an at-will staff. They don't come under civil service rules. We try to treat them well, especially the ones that are bigger than me, younger, and right, Dustin? You too, Stephen. We'll get the Michigan State side as well. So, anyway.
Thank you.
The firing of McCabe 24 hours before a meeting, we talked, okay, we already
That was
started
mine, I
that.
think. wasn't
Would you support someone hiring him as a second congressman? I guess
it?
we've
That was
gone
mine.
over that too. Okay, Claire Renwick.
I can't have another one. I handed in 3, didn't I?
Yeah, that was 2, this is 3.
Oh, what's the third one? I thought we were.
I loved your comment at the congressional breakfast about engaging talk to each other.
We already talked about that. That was about,
Okay.
yeah, thank you. That was about inviting,
Your
having
your
the
name
other
comes up all
hours.
the time, so I'm just,
We're
okay,
around
next
more
one from
people.
Claire Renwick. Hopefully I don't murder this, but Del J. Younglove, sir?
Deidre?
Oh,
Deidre.
Dietrich, I'm sorry.
So I'm actually gonna ask my own question because you touched on it to begin with. So quite a few things. First of all, you talk about, mental health. Mental health would have stopped whatever would have happened in Florida. So I have quite a few things to discuss.
Not only mental health. That's
Other
one
things
issue.
too. But that is one very huge issue. So here are some of my concerns. The CDC is not allowed to study gun violence. So we talk about mental health, and we have a Center for Disease Control that's not allowed to study gun violence, and then we're relating that to mental health, which unfortunately can put a stigma on mental health. But we have a lot of issues to think about before we can even conquer that. First of all, in health insurance. So I work in the medical field, and I can sit in an emergency room and I can watch people sit there for days waiting for placement into a mental facility where they can get the help that they need. I have petitioned and been called to court where people have been released from care before recommendations. We have a system that's failing. We do not want to have universal health insurance, but we want everyone to be covered underneath some sort of mental health program. The only way people are going to get mental health care is if they have health insurance. They also have to seek care. I see people a lot of times, they get diagnosed with cancer, they haven't gone to the doctors for years, so now the cancer's progressed. So you're talking about mental health, and how are we gonna help that when individuals have to step forward and actually say, I have an issue? It's the only way you're gonna know about it most of the time. And if somebody petitions them, then they have to wait for placement to get into a facility. If they don't have health insurance, they don't always get placed. If they have Medicaid, they sometimes get placed faster than if they have private insurance. So you have all these issues going around. Top that off with, we're making recommendations or we're saying positive things about teachers having guns, but we don't want to raise taxes. So how are we going to train all these people? We're not gonna have the money, so we can't raise taxes. We just had a tax break. I'm more than willing to give up my $25 a paycheck in order to supply mental health insurance for people that need it, in order to better placement for these individuals. The other thing that I wanted to comment on, and I'm curious what you think about all of this, is the Second Amendment right guarantees guns, but it doesn't talk about bump stocks or magazine rounds. And I haven't heard very many people, except for the president in the very beginning, and then change his mind as soon as the NRA decided that they didn't really like what he had to say. We don't hear any more discussions about the end of bump stocks. I don't hear any more discussions about magazines being limited. I don't hear any more discussion about changing the age limit to purchase a gun. If you can purchase a AR-15 at 18, but you can't purchase a handgun until 21, nothing makes sense to me. So I know that there are laws that are out there and that people are discussing them. They don't make any sense to me. They're not addressing all of these issues. They're piecemealing and putting an idea together that's acceptable to a particular group of people. I'm talking about everybody. I'm not talking about Republicans or Democrats. I'm not talking about the NRA. I'm not talking about unions for schools. I'm talking about the kids. I have a grave concern about children, and I'm not hearing a discussion about all of these failings. I keep hearing things thrown out there, but as you can tell, just mental health, I've made a bunch of reasons why we can't focus on that with the current situation, whether it be health insurance, whether it be lack of funds, whether it be lack of facilities, whether it be the lack of doctors. So I'm curious, how are we going to come across all of these barriers? None of that is addressed in any of these plans that you're discussing.
Okay. First on the mental health issue. This past year, last year, we passed the Century 21 Cures Act, which had a very significant mental health component in it. Century 21 Cures and the mental health component are just starting to take effect. They were only signed into law at the end of President Obama's administration. So we expect to see some real help from that. That gave abilities for assignment of individuals to mental health care. It gave more dollars, significant funding to mental health care, along with the Century 21 Cures, NIH funding, and the rest. So I think you're going to see some enhancements take place that will be very positive moving in that direction. On the healthcare issue, that's why we need healthcare reform. That's why the House passed and sent to the Senate a very comprehensive under our provisions in the healthcare repeal and replace of the Affordable Care Act, significant changes that made a patient sensitive approach to healthcare, that said that decisions ought to be made between the medical care provider and the patient first and foremost, and gave the opportunity for not a one-size-fits-all like the Affordable Care Act that was more costly than necessary because it required same coverage for everyone. This gave a patient-centered approach, and we hope to see that move before the end of this year. The Senate, in fact, is working on an enhancement to what was called the Graham-Cassidy proposal that almost had success finally in the Senate, and that'll give some funding for it as well. Any other approach will be too costly, will not be flexible enough to meet the needs of individuals, and hasn't worked any other place. On the gun issue, bump stocks will ultimately be done away with. Most of us never heard of a bump stock till it was used in Las Vegas. The ATF has responsibility for making those regulations. They have been given the responsibility to come up with a proposal to eliminate not only bump stocks, but anything that, for all intents and purposes, makes a weapon automatic. Because there is no legal right, unless for a very few individuals in this country, licensed to have an automatic weapon, no one else can have it. Semi-automatics, you still pull the trigger, one shot per trigger pull. You can't just hold it like an automatic and it sprays. The AR-15, the same thing is true. One pull at a time. And so I believe the ATF, and I support ending bump stocks. Ultimately ATF will, I'm sure, come down that way, and with our gun reform legislation that'll work through both houses, bump stocks will be done away with as well. As far as dealing with what works, we're attempting to do that. We appreciate seeing the emotion that's out there. Why wouldn't there be emotion? Lives were taken. Lives were taken in Sutherland Springs as well. Lives were taken in Las Vegas. We ought to take a look at that. But when you come down to making law, you'd better be careful to do it thinking it through, getting away from the emotion and getting to what works. What would have stopped what took place in Sutherland Springs, or more closely related in Florida? What would have kept Nick Cruz from getting in? Or ultimately, what could have taken him out more quickly before 17 lives were taken and multiple people were injured in the process? What would have worked? I think thus far we've taken 2 strong steps in the House. Number one, give resources. And we have resources. The beauty of a tax cut is that our revenue will increase to the federal government. When we have to know how to spend it. It always does. It happened under John F. Kennedy. It happened under Reagan. It happened under every single tax cut. Revenue to the federal government increases. So there will be appropriate places, not only giving it back further to taxpayers, but using it for purposes like this. And so I think there will be dollars, complete dollars for dealing with flexible issues of various schools and training the local school districts, but then also doing the background check system that we, in fact, enhanced back in December, passing it through the House in a bipartisan fashion. Both these bills have passed in bipartisan fashion through the House. Again, call your senators. Tell them to get off their duffs and do something. Quit the filibuster that's going on. We want them to debate, but it's time to do something. You can't just stop it like a dam. It has to move forward. Next question.
Yes, Bonnie Weber. Do you care to
Bonnie?
ask your own question?
That's okay, read it and I can amplify it.
Okay. 3 questions. More or continued wars? That is a question.
No, the first part is my concern about the deficit and how the money is being spent. The
Okay.
top part?
I am concerned about the huge deficit our country has created and urge you not to approve any funding for the following. I'm sorry. More or continued wars in Afghanistan, Korea, Iran, and so forth. The next one is the wall, deportations of people who have been working and living here, or more ICE agents. And the third one is the President's Parade.
Oh, gosh.
I'm concerned.
Yeah, I don't think there's going to be a parade.
I
So
think that my Congress is the only thing that can stop this. See, if it's not funded, it can't all move ahead. And that's all we have.
let me ask you a question. Were you concerned about the $10 trillion of debt increased under the last administration?
Yes.
Where was
I'm
your
more
where was your
concerned
voice then?
I'm more concerned about what's going on now because of how it's being spent. War was being diminished in the previous administration. And yes, there was spending. The economy needed a great stimulus during those years.
Well, we will do our best. Having a record as the most conservative member of the Michigan delegation, I want to keep that.
That president needs to be
That's
ready.
fiscally
You're the only one.
fiscally as well as otherwise. The spending, because of what we've done since 2011, in the discretionary of our budget, the Ryan Murray plan, we've kept that since 2011. We have not increased the discretionary spending beyond 2011 levels. The mandatory area and defense area was kept at that and diminished. Not the mandatory, but the defense area was kept at that because it's not mandatory spending. And it was reduced to the point that we had 75% of our Marine fighter jets grounded for lack of maintenance and parts. We had 50% of our naval strike force, air strike force, grounded for lack of training, parts, and maintenance. We were incapable to carry on 2 wars at the same time, which has been our standard for years and years. And since we finally, under the last budget resolution, we're able to break that sequester. Now we can bump it up to take care of those planes, to take care of those ships, the training, the excessive hours that our crews are spending overtime without resources to make sure their needs are met. On the issue of what goes on in fighting the terrorist actions in Afghanistan, Iraq has really been drawn down and continues to be drawn down. But we're not going to tell the terrorists a date certain we're leaving totally. We're not going to do that. We haven't left Germany. We haven't left Japan since the war either. And we haven't left Korea since the Korean War, and the DMZ is there to show that. But for us to walk away and say we are ending any involvement in dealing with terrorist actions or nutcases like the North Korean dictator, which I think we ought to say, because of our strong efforts on that, this guy's coming to the table in May. We'll see what happens with that. But for our good, our nation's security, we have to keep an eye on what's going on in the terrorist parts of the world. We have to keep our military engaged at some level. And I think we also have to listen to the commanders in the field to tell us what level that is, as opposed to the highly political Pentagon at times. So while I will work significantly to reduce unnecessary spending, I'm certainly going to be supportive of necessary spending to secure our country, its freedom, its safety, as well as make sure that we continue to do away with the waste, fraud, and abuse that's in our government spending system, but to do the priority things. One thing is priority that we have is defending our country against all enemies, foreign and domestic. Another point that we have that no one else has is securing our borders. And if they aren't secure now, we have to find a way to do it. And we have to take the immigration laws, at least the ones we have, and follow them. And that's all this president is doing now. Because prior presidents and administrations, Republican and Democrat, let that go. And that's why we have the problem. And then President Obama set DACA in place without authority to do that. He recognized that, but ultimately out of frustration he did it. And this president is simply saying, we're not going to do it that way anymore. Now the court has thrown the president's plan out, so we still have this muddled mess. Fortunately, we have a bill in the House on DACA that's a comprehensive immigration plan that gives those 700,000 DACA recipients legally, they took that plan. It gives them a way to stay in this country legally, and ultimately, over the course of a significant number of years, then to have the opportunity to go and do it the right way, become citizens. But secure the borders with whatever's needed, end chain migration, and visa waiver, not the visa waiver, the diversity visa, which has never been used in our country. And to make sure that we have the resources available, ICE and otherwise, to carry out the laws that we have.
So you approve of the wall that the president keeps talking about and the deportations that we see that are happening?
I approve, let me say exactly what I mean. Not as you said it, exactly what I mean. I approve of securing our borders, whatever it takes. Certain places a wall, certain place a fence will do, certain place you don't need anything, except maybe a drone, because you got 50-foot cliffs. Certain places, if you just put our customs and border agents on the line, as opposed to 50 miles back because they legally can't go on Bureau of Land Management or national park lands, which doesn't make sense to me. Let them be on those lands to make sure that we don't have incursion 50 miles in before they have a chance to stop it. That's the securing of the border that I support. And I support carrying out the laws that we have until we change them. I believe that we're a nation of laws under a constitution. And if we pass laws, they ought to be carried out. If we don't like them, change them. But right now we have immigration laws that this president is simply following. And that involves deportations of some.
Have you done anything to change the immigration system?
Yeah, I've co-sponsored the Goodlatte bill, which I've just told you about, that is a comprehensive immigration reform bill. And we look forward to having that, I hope, taken out of the House in the next 2, 3, 4 weeks.
Which specifies what?
I just went through the whole thing again. I told you, secures the borders, ends chain migration, ends diversity visas, and gives 700,000 DACA recipients a legal way to stay in this country. And that's what people are asking for. But you got to take the other with it as well. We can't continue to have chain migration. Nuclear family, yes, but not second cousin, third removed. Next question.
Next question is from Greg. Excuse me, but I am having a hard time making this out. New? Greg?
Neil, that's me.
Okay.
Thank you for, first of all, for noticing
That's
my
your
attendance.
stage name, right?
Thank you for noticing my attendance at your town halls. I appreciate it. As you know, I've been here, and I'm fortunate enough to be able to come here and represent and ask questions for other people who aren't able to come because you never hold them during hours they can attend. And so the question I want to ask this time is, you've stated at least 2 of the town halls I have been at that you don't think there's gerrymandering in Michigan. And I suggested that Matt would say otherwise. As you just mentioned, it takes you 5 hours to travel across your district. That seems like a lot for 1/14 of the population of Michigan. So that's one way. It's number 2. Former Representative Dr. Joe Schwartz has suggested that he thinks Michigan is gerrymandered. Number 3, 400,000 people signed a petition saying that they think there's a problem and we need an independent commission. So I want to understand. I want to know what is your rationale for saying that there's not gerrymandering in Michigan?
My district is the 3rd largest district, land space in the state. Why? You know how districts are set. Every district has somewhere between 700, 750,000 citizens in the district. UP, the 1st district, he doesn't get home most times. It'll be weeks before he's able to get to his own house in Watersmeet. Why? Because he has the whole Upper Peninsula, all the counties in the Upper Peninsula, and he has most of the lower Peninsula. It's an unbelievably large district to get that population in. That's not gerrymandering. That's just simply, you got to get 700, 750,000 people, so you have a one-person, one-vote concept across the United States. There are some states that only have 1 member of Congress and 2 senators. They all have 2 senators because they represent the states. We represent districts. So in my case, in order to get that, I have 7 counties. There are people in Wayne County that only have a portion of Wayne County to get 750,000 people in. My good friend and colleagues, and I say that truthfully, Debbie Stabben and I work a lot together, cross party lines on key issues. Pardon? Pardon? What did I say? No, excuse me. Debbie and I are good friends too, but we don't work together, House, Senate deal. Debbie Dingle, thank you for correcting me. Her district just takes in part of Washtenaw, which is Ann Arbor, Pittsfield Township, Ypsilanti, Dearborn in Wayne County, other portions of Wayne County. That's how it's made. So that's the first statement to say it's not gerrymandered. It's based upon trying to get 14 members of Congress representing the state in districts that have 700 to 750,000 people. We are also a state, by law, a voters' rights state. What does that mean? That means we have a minority population, significant enough in our state, that they have to be given a certain number of districts to meet their percentage in the state. So right now I think that's 4 districts they are required to have in this state. And so in order to do that and to keep, which is required by law, keep contiguous borders as much as possible, you have, for instance, Brenda Lawrence, who represents Southfield, a good portion of Wayne County, but also thrown in some of the Grosse Points. It doesn't fit with her district necessarily, but they just crop them out a little bit, a small part of Grosse Points, keeps the contiguous nature in place, and that's her district. John Conyers, before he had to leave office, had similar arrangement in order to make sure that there was a minority district represented by a minority. So that's another point. We are also required under that law that our Supreme Court makes that decision ultimately whether we're following the law or not. So for the last 2 redistrictings, the plans have gone to our Supreme Court to check out. They found no problems with it. I think that the redistricting 18 years ago, they asked for a couple little changes. Those are made to make sure they met Voters' Rights Act. They met the issue of contiguous nature and all the rest. Took place. Generally, if there's a problem with it, the electorate or the parties will file a complaint and an appeal. How many appeals have been filed?
2.
None.
2.
No appeals have been
Are
filed.
you saying that because you don't know, or are you saying
No.
that because you're
No
lying?
appeal.
Because there's been 2.
No appeals.
2011 and last year.
The Democrat.
Okay, we don't need to argue. Anybody can look it up. 2011 and again last year.
No. At the time of the redistricting, that's when it happens. The
2011?
group right now are doing it after the fact, after the time to make the appeal and complaint. There was no complaint or appeal, and this is fact, from the Democrat Party or the Republican Party calling into contest the redistricting.
You're parsing it so finely to make the, just so.
That's the law. So you and I will have to agree to
I'm
disagree.
sorry, I thought it
Neil.
was a lot of follow-up questions.
Does he have another question?
Well,
You
we got
didn't answer
another
that
card.
question. You didn't talk about the 400,000 people that signed a petition.
But that's as a
That's
result
not even
of
on
people
the
like.
card that we
Yeah.
had.
Yes, it is.
That's a result of people that right now are ticked that this president got elected. They want to change the process, just like in Pennsylvania. And so the Democrat Supreme Court in Pennsylvania has now called for redistricting and rewritten.
That's a
the map.
nonpartisan
It's
group that
nonpartisan.
wants to form a nonpartisan commission. That's a total falsehood, sir.
Okay.
Let's go to the next one.
Let's
Let's
Go
go
to
to the next one.
Democratic Supreme Court.
Thanks for coming up here. I'm not going to call you a liar.
I am
I'm
going to
not
call you
about
one
to.
because you
I'm going
are.
to say misinformed.
Any more of that carrying on, and we're gonna ask you to leave, sir. Okay?
That's fine, we'll
Keep
fill
it
it.
And I would like to also ask you if you would allow us to give you a real name and not the name that you put there, or that you use online.
Gregory Neal, that's my name, thank you.
Okay, our next question is from Richard Micka. Dick, would you like to
Sure,
take
I'd
your
be
own
happy
question?
to address that myself. Thank you for coming, Congressman, I appreciate that very much. I haven't been here for 10 years at Township Hall,
Well, it's about time you came back.
and I'm glad too. But since 2010, the Great Lakes Restoration Initiative has been very good about cleaning up the Great Lakes, over $3 billion so far. And we got quite a bit of it here. And up until this time, I've had no problems with it, but all of a sudden, there was a Great Lakes Restoration Initiative study done by the U.S. Geological Survey and other people. And they ignored Raisin Point, which is just a mile that way. There's a lot of wetland out there that they overlooked. They had created what they call parameters. There were 7 of them, and we got parameter 0 out here on Raisin Point, which means that there's no restorable wetlands. Now, I wish you'd take a look at it. I've written up all the data here. I'll give it to Dustin, and I think you'll get the idea. It's pretty impressive. But thank you. I haven't had any complaints for 10 years, so I really can't complain today. Thank you very much.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, thanks. We'll take a look at that.
Very good.
As you know, we've been very supportive of keeping GLRI fully funded.
Yeah.
And we're continuing to do that, involved with a number of letters to the White House, as well as to the EPA, expressing support, as well as to our Appropriations Committee to make sure that we refund it again. That's been a bipartisan approach. And in fact, more than that, it's been a Great Lakes States coalition approach as well, except for just a few members who haven't joined with us on it. But We've been successful with the last administration and this administration in getting full funding, and I think we'll be successful again.
Wonderful. Thank you, sir.
Mr. Younglove,
Right there, go ahead.
the president is constantly labeling the media fake news and an enemy of the people. Do you consider news outlets such as the New York Times or the Monroe News an enemy of the people or an important part of a democratic society? And why won't Congress let the CDC study the issue of gun violence?
Let me take the last question first. It's not their purview. CDC is for disease, health-related issue control, and not Second Amendment issues. The trouble we had why they were pushed back because they were then lobbying against the Second Amendment and against people having, general population having guns. They can't do that under the Hatch Act. That's illegal for them to do. So we made it very clear in stripping them of the opportunity even to consider doing that because, number one, it was not in their purview. That's where ATF comes in. That's where the Justice Department comes in. It's not for a Center for Disease Control to consider constitutional issues relative to Second Amendment gun issues. That was the rationale why that legislation was strongly passed to say you're violating the Hatch Act, you can't do that. On the issue of fake news, no, I wouldn't say all news is fake news. If I were the president, and it was better than 90% of the news that was put out was attacking me, I would understand why I'd be saying, man, there's a lot of fake news out there. Monroe, I love what the Monroe Evening does. I see reports from all sides. I even get covered in the Monroe. There are certain papers in my district that won't even cover me, not till election time. Then they want to do an editorial review board with me when they haven't taken a single one, in fact said they would not take my press releases. Now, I have a concern about that. When I grew up in the city of Chicago as a young boy, I delivered, back when all 4 papers were in Chicago, I was a paper boy. I delivered in the morning the Chicago Tribune, the Chicago Sun-Times. In the afternoon, after school or after athletics, I delivered the Chicago Daily News and the Chicago American. As a paper boy, I feel proud of the fact that we had such media. We don't have those. We only have 2 of those anymore in Chicago. My son is a journalist, a Pulitzer-nominated journalist as well. I'm not opposed to the media. I think it has to be. In a free society, we need a free press to keep us honest. But when you see the type of biased reporting or inaccurate or incomplete reporting that goes on with a number of our national media, cable, news networks, etc., and that's on both sides of the aisle. That's not only MSNBC and CNN, that's Fox as well. We've got a problem. And that's where we need some voices out there that are starting to stand up and say, wait, we got to get back to reporting the news and making it very clear that our opinions are in the opinion page and not the reporting page. And so that's my concern. What the president said, he says. You don't see me putting out press releases calling fake news. I don't do that.
You think it's irresponsible for him to call the news the enemy of the people? That's fundamental part of our Constitution.
Well,
freedom of press, and I think that undermines the legitimacy of the press, along with, calls the FBI is disgraceful or not trustworthy. Do you think that our law enforcement agencies, like the FBI, are trustworthy? Or
I would mince words more if I were him.
why do we hold the president to lower standards than we hold you to?
No,
You could be president if you
You
were.
have the opportunity to hold him to a higher standard. We all have an opportunity. But this president was elected because he talked to the people frankly, they liked what he said. Even though many would say, I wish he'd controlled his tweets a little bit, yet doggone it, the same old didn't work. We got further in debt, we lost more freedoms, we had less respect around the world, and this guy sounds like he's going to bring it all back. And so they elected him. And now there's a broad cross-section of people that aren't happy about that. I understand it. Hillary Clinton made comments last week that shows she's not happy with the people who elected Trump. Was that wrong for her to say? Absolutely. Absolutely. But that's America. If she wants to say it and take the heat for saying it, okay, let her do it. If Trump says what he's going to say and he takes the heat for it, okay. But it's his position. My position is that we need a free press, but I'm very, very frustrated with the lack of a free press out there to a great extent on the national media stage. And that's why we need to make sure we have our local media that's willing to talk to us from the local community. One more follow-up.
Sure. Thank you. Do you think that the media is attacking Trump because of his personal behavior or because he's supposedly a Republican?
No,
Maybe his behavior is drawing all the scrutiny because of the adult actresses, the Trump University scandal. He paid $25 million before he was put in office to silence people because of fraud.
Okay, that's allegations that are out there. The media, if they do their work, and the legal system, if it does its work, will tell us if it's true. Bill Clinton had the same thing. People didn't like us talking about Bill Clinton. They certainly didn't like him being impeached, which he was impeached in the House, not convicted in the Senate. That's the process. So I'm not here today to say that Republicans, every member of the Republican Party or official is lily white. But I wouldn't say the Democrats are lily white either. So that's where the people have to continue to be motivated to take involvement in their communities, in their society, and in their politics. Trump pulled people out to do that. Trump pulled people in Monroe County to vote abnormally. Why do I mean that? I have union employees today who still come up to me and put their arm around me and say, "You supporting our guy?" And I say, just make sure I'm not going to make a mistake. Who's your guy? Trump, our president. You supporting our president? And I say, yeah, look at my record. I'm supporting him on his policy. 100%, basically. Good. You support him, we support you. Now that, I personally like to hear, but I like to hear it more so because it says to me that more and more people are looking at the issues, not at the union, not at the parties. They're looking at the policy. Now they may look into the wrong policy too, who knows? But that's America. I'm getting the high sign, I gotta get to the airport. I got a couple more minutes. Don't I? When did this start? Started at 10, so I got a couple minutes. So I mean that's where I'm at in answering the question. Would I use fake news? No, I probably wouldn't. At least in general. I'd say the New York Times is in a sad state of affairs.
But you did use the term fake news earlier at the very beginning.
Yeah, there's fake news that is out there. Clearly, there's fake news.
What if it's not?
But if it's, I'm not saying the entire establishment is fake news, but there is fake news. I know it because I sit in those committee meetings, and I listen to Sean Hannity at times, and I say, "That's not what happened in the committee." Or I listen to MSNBC or CNN. That's not what was debated on the floor. That's not how our colleagues get together. I'd like to tell you, we're not at each other's throats. In the majority of cases, we get along just fine in the House, Democrats and Republicans on the committees and on the floor. But then we have some strongly held positions, and we debate those. But it's not as some of the fake news reports talk about so often. And that rips you people up, because that's all you hear. And that's why I do this town hall. One more question, or are we finished?
No, I think one more question, but I'd like to make a statement, and this is not a paid political statement either. I have been working with Tim's office on a lot of veterans issues that have gone way over the top. And I've got to say that his representative has been extremely good on these veterans issues, extremely good. They are right in there, they are doing the most they can do to pursue and speed up some of these claims that have gotten bogged down in bureaucracy.
We'll do our best for my staff on all the issues that you will bring to us. We're not miracle workers, but sometimes we pull a miracle. And Elise does quite a few of those. Yes, sir, you had a question.
Do you ever see the day when we would have a mandatory balanced budget in the U.S.?
Well, I'd love to. I've signed on legislation that would require a balanced budget. I think that will be voted out of the House again. I say again because we've done it before. Call your senators. Did I mention that before? Senator Stabenow, Senator Peters, you can call any other senator, but there are senators. And say, go to Chuck Schumer and say, stop it. Stop this cloture 60-vote requirement. You know that the Republicans have only 51 votes. Unless you give 9 votes opportunity from the Democrats, you don't even debate the issue. No, I would support it. And I co-sponsored the bill. And the House will probably pass it again. I want to say thank you for being here. And as I always say, we are Americans. And Americans have an opportunity that few countries in the world have, or certainly had before we tried it. We're still perfecting it. And that means that we have to keep involved with it. But while we have diversity of opinions, and we can be strong in those opinions, let's still be thankful that we're free to have that diversity, but still love each other as American citizens and work together. Thank you. See you at the next town hall.